The Seattle Seahawks had a pretty usual and typical Seattle Seahawks year. They started out the year great, but they would finish the year for 12-4, which is still pretty good, but towards the end of the year, they did not play as well compared to the beginning of the year. And of course, the cherry on top, they would get grilled in the playoffs and would fail to even make the NFC Championship game. Russell Wilson trade rumors have started to arise, and today, let's talk about what's next for the Seahawks and what they can do and should do to really improve this team. Before we do get started though, make sure you hit that like button if you guys enjoyed, as it helps out the channel a lot. Also, subscribe if you guys are new and enjoy the content on here so you do not miss out on any new videos. And we're on the road to 500 subscribers, and the support lately has been amazing. Thank you guys for that. And as a special, I will react to my first 2 videos ever. And the daily shout out goes to Breezy Sports, so go ahead and check him out. He has been a massive supporter of this channel. The link to his channel will be in the description below. But with that being said, let's get this video started. And I want to start out by talking about the Seahawks roster. And Russell Wilson is the first player I will talk about. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He is a very good dual threat. He can pass the ball and he can also, run the ball. Now his future is uncertain, but even then, he is still very good. This past year, he had 4,212 passing yards, 40 passing touchdowns, and completed 69% of his passes. And then on the ground, he had 513 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Chris Carson is the next player I want to talk about. And Chris Carson is one of the most underrated running backs in the league, in my opinion. He can, run the ball and is also a really solid receiving back. And in 12 games this year, he had 681 yards on the ground, 5 rushing touchdowns, and averaged 5 yards a carry. And through the air, he had 487 yards and 4 touchdowns. DK Metcalf is the next player I want to talk about. And DK Metcalf had an amazing year for the Seahawks. I mean, all I can really say is that he was just amazing this past year, as he had 1,303 yards, 10 receiving touchdowns, and caught 64% of his targets. Moving on, let's talk about Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is a very good number 2 receiver and complement next to DK Metcalf. And this past year, he also had an amazing year with 1,054 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns, and caught 76% of his targets. David Moore is the next player I want to talk about. And David Moore, he is a very good wide receiver and, very underrated player. He's a really good, wide receiver 3 next to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and is a very underrated player. This past year, he had 417 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns and caught 74.5% of his targets. Up next, let's talk about Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner is still a very good player, even though he is starting to get up there a little bit in age. Either way, he is still an amazing player. He can stop the run and is still a very good coverage linebacker, as always, as the guy has been an amazing coverage one of the best coverage linebackers of all time. I mean, you could really say that. All I can say is that Bobby Wagner is amazing. This past year, he had 8 passes defended. Shaquille Griffin is the next player I want to talk about. And Shaquille Griffin, well, he's had a pretty up and down year, but even then, he is still a pretty solid cornerback. And this year, he will be a free agent. Who knows what they do with him? More on that later. But in 12 games, he had 3 interceptions and 12 passes defended. And the final player I want to talk about is Jamal Adams. Now, Jamal Adams, I'm sure a lot of you guys love to clown him for being an awful coverage safety this year, and believe me, those jokes are hilarious. Okay, I laugh really hard every time I see the Jamal Adams memes. Okay, but anyways, he is still a really good player and one of the best safeties in the NFL. The guy can stop the run very well. He's also a really good pass rusher, and usually he's a good coverage safety. I don't know what happened to his coverage skills. Maybe they just disappeared or something. I don't know what happened. But either way, Jamal Adams is still an amazing player. And that will wrap it up with the Seahawks roster. Now let's talk about the big elephant, the elephant in the room. And that is the Russell Wilson trade rumors and, of course, the Russell Wilson fiasco. Now, as we know, Russell Wilson has recently expressed frustration with how the Seahawks, have not been able to provide him with a good offensive line, and has stated, well, obviously in a pretty, he's really just said that he's tired of getting hit, and of course, I mean, that is really bringing us to the Seahawks issues, okay? Now, going over like you're really just going over what I would do if I was the Seahawks GM, and what they will probably do, in this year's offseason. I mean, if I'm the Seahawks, I would definitely keep Russell Wilson if you can. He still has a lot of great years in him, and they should do anything they can. Just get every last bit they can before he does start declining, or before he does choose to hang it up. And frankly, I do think the Seahawks will do anything they can to keep Russell Wilson this year. And I mean, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't he? He is still an amazing player and was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. However, if they really do want to keep him in, because I mean, it's kind of starting to become clear that he is a little bit frustrated with the Seattle Seahawks organization, they must improve the offensive line, okay? The issues with the Seahawks, really, it's mainly the offensive line and the fact that their defense is not good, especially, their front seven and really just their pass rush, okay? The Seattle Seahawks have hit a wall. There is a reason why I said they had typical Seattle Seahawks year, because ever since Super Bowl 49, they've hit this wall of not being able to get past the second round of the playoffs. And I'm kind of doubtful about whether they really are even Super Bowl contenders, because every year, we always say, oh, Seattle's Super Bowl contenders, and at the beginning of the year, they look like that. And Russell Wilson is looking like a top MVP candidate. But then, of course, at the end of the season, they don't perform nearly as well, and Russell Wilson really isn't in the MVP conversation anymore. And of course, they end up deciding, they just end up losing in the playoffs. And if the Seahawks really want to get past that, wall, if they want to break through, they must improve the offensive line, okay? I can't even stress how, offensive lines, I'm pretty sure a lot of us know how important they are to a quarterback. I mean, if you saw what happened with Joe Burrow, if you watched the Super Bowl, I think we all know how good, important an offensive line really is. Not only that, but if he has to deal with a healthy 49ers team, he has to deal with Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa. He has to deal with Aaron Donald, and he has to deal with Chandler Jones and now JJ Watt, 2 times a year. And of course, that it's not the same prime 20-sack player that JJ Watt was, but still a pretty solid player. He has to deal, he has to play 6 games, 2 times against each opponent. He has to play 6 games against some pretty good front sevens. Not only that, but if he runs into the Packers or the Saints or the Buccaneers, well, let's just say he is also kind of screwed in those situations, as the Packers do have a pretty good defensive line. The Buccaneers, Todd Bowles, even if they can't retain everyone, even if they can't retain Shaq Barrett, of course, this isn't the Buccaneers video, they still got a really good front seven, and I'm sure Todd Bowles is going to show no mercy to Russell Wilson. But really, the biggest issues with the Seattle Seahawks is, of course, the offensive line and the defensive line. Now, one thing I will say is that Russell Wilson, he does need to restructure his contract, as, a lot of quarterbacks have made sacrifices in the past, making less money, granted still a lot of money, but they do that for the benefit of the team. Now, going on to free agency, the Seahawks only have $11 million in cap space. But if Russell Wilson is willing to take less money and will restructure his contract, and if they do restructure Bobby Wagner, as the guy is aging, they can, that can increase the money. And if they were to cut Carlos Dunlap and Jarrod Reed, they can get $51 million in cap space, which is a lot. And that should be enough to, bring back important free agents and, improve the team by acquiring good free agents. Now, Shaquille Griffin and Mike Iupati and Benson Mayo will be free agents, but if they can bring back 1 or 2 of them, that should be good. And even, I would definitely like to bring back maybe just one, like at least one of them. But getting to the free agent targets, Trent Williams, Russell Okung, Kendall Lamb, Joe Tooney, Brandon Scherf, Austin Blythe, Corey Linsley, David Andrews, Ted Karras, and Austin Ryder would be pretty good options to help improve this offensive line. As, they are pretty good at Damian Lewis is pretty good, and so is Dwayne Brown, but, they really do need to improve the offensive line, as I said before. And to get help with the defense, first off, they need to fire Ken Norton Jr. I need to say that. I forgot to say that, but fire Ken Norton Jr. The guy is absolutely horrible. But for the free agents, Leonard Williams would be a pretty good addition. So would Justin Houston and Yannick Ngakoue. Xavier Rhodes would also be pretty good. And William Jackson, Troy Hill, and Darius Williams, they would all be pretty good options to help patch up this defense. I also think they could trade for Orlando Brown, and that would be pretty good, as the guy did request a trade from the Baltimore Ravens. And I mean, if they can get him, that would be a massive win for the Seahawks. Aside from that, though, that is all I have to say for free agency. Now, for the draft targets, of course, they will not have their first round pick, but they will have a second round pick. And they could go after someone like a Trey Smith, or Leon Eichenberg, or Jay Tufele, or Greg Newsome. Really, they should patch up, any offensive line weaknesses, or defensive weaknesses like the defensive line, or the cornerback position, as outside of Shaquille Griffin, especially if they do lose him, they are not great. Quentin Dunbar was absolutely horrible for the Seahawks this past year. But to wrap up this video, the Seahawks obviously have had a drama-filled start to their offseason. But if they can fix the offensive line and the defense, I have no doubt in my mind that the Seahawks can finally break through that wall of not being able to make it past the second round of the playoffs. And this time, they could definitely win a championship if they can improve those weaknesses. But with that being said, that will be the end of today's video. Make sure you hit that like button if you guys enjoyed, as it really helps out the channel. Also, subscribe if you guys are new and enjoy the content on here so you do not miss out on any new videos. Plus, we are also on the road to 500 subscribers, and once we hit 500, I will do a reaction to my first 2 videos ever. Also, shout out to Breezy Sports. The link to his channel will be in the description below. Make sure you guys go ahead and check him out. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.